Imagine waking up in a mountain valley where winter does not rush. It settles in. The sun disappears behind peaks. Days shorten. Roads vanish under snow. No trucks arrive. No food comes in. No help is on the way. For most people today, hunger would come quickly. For mountain farmers, this was normal life. They survived by planting crops that refused to fail in cold, darkness, and famine. Mountain farming has always been a battle against time and light. Short summers, sudden frosts, thin soils, and long winters meant every planting choice was a survival decision. There were no emergency imports, no steady trade routes, and no second chances if a crop failed. Mountain communities built food systems around resilience, choosing plants that matured fast, stored for months, overwintered under snow, or returned each spring without replanting. Taste was optional. Endurance was mandatory. Rutabaga thrived in cold climates because it preferred cool temperatures and tolerated frost better than most root crops. Mountain farmers planted it in late spring or early summer, directly into poor, rocky soils where other vegetables failed. It required little fertility and benefited from long, cool growing periods. Excessive heat damaged it, but cold strengthened it. This made rutabaga ideal for high elevations, where summer was brief and unpredictable. Historically, rutabaga was left in the ground under snow or stored in straw and sand. It resisted rot and required no cellar. Its advantages were reliability, calories, and storage life. Its main disadvantage was slow maturity and bland flavor. Nutritionally, it provided carbohydrates, fiber, and vitamin C. Today, rutabaga is easy to grow, inexpensive, and costs little in seed. It remains one of the cheapest cold climate survival crops available. Turnips were valued in mountain regions because they matured quickly in cool soil. Farmers planted them late in summer for fall harvest or early spring for fast growth before frost returned. They tolerated light freezes and shallow soils. Their speed was their strength. Turnips provided food when slower crops could not finish. The disadvantage was limited storage compared to rutabaga, but their rapid production reduced risk during unstable seasons. Turnips offered both edible roots and greens, doubling their value. They supplied carbohydrates, vitamin C, and minerals when fresh food was scarce. Historically, they were eaten fresh or added to stews rather than stored long-term. Today, turnips are extremely affordable and easy to grow, even in containers or poor soil. Their main benefit remains speed. In short seasons, food that arrives quickly often matters more than food that stores forever. Parsnips were uniquely suited to mountain climates because cold improved them. Farmers planted them early and left them in the ground through winter. Frost converted starches into sugars, making them sweeter as conditions worsened. Parsnips tolerated snow, ice, and neglect better than carrots. Their long growing time was a disadvantage, but their ability to bridge the hunger gap between winter and spring made them essential in high, cold regions. Historically, parsnips required little storage. Farmers harvested them as needed from frozen soil. This reduced spoilage and labor. Nutritionally, parsnips delivered carbohydrates, fiber, and potassium when diets were limited. Today, they remain easy to grow but require patience. Seed is inexpensive, but yield comes late. Their value lies not in speed, but in reliability during the most dangerous season of the year, early spring scarcity. Beets thrived in mountain regions because they tolerated cool temperatures and uneven moisture. Farmers planted them in loose soil where roots could swell before frost. Both roots and greens were used, maximizing calories per plant. Beets stored well in pits or cellars and resisted spoilage better than many vegetables. Their main disadvantage was sensitivity to extreme heat, which mountain climates rarely produced, making them dependable at elevation. Historically, beets were boiled, roasted, or added to soups and preserved through winter storage. They provided carbohydrates, iron, and folate when meat and fresh greens were scarce. Today, beets are inexpensive, widely available, and easy to grow. Seed costs are low and storage remains simple. Their continued relevance comes from flexibility. They function as fresh food, stored food, and nutritional support in cold environments. Carrots only survived mountain farming when storage varieties were used. Farmers selected thick, hardy roots grown slowly in cool soil. Thin or fast carrots failed. Stored in sand or pits, carrots lasted months. Their disadvantage was sensitivity to frost before maturity, but once harvested, they stored exceptionally well. Nutritionally, carrots provided vitamin A during dark months. Today, storage carrots remain cheap, practical, and highly effective in cold climates. Potatoes became viable in mountain regions only when farmers adapted planting and storage methods. They were planted in loose soil after frost risk passed and harvested before hard freezes. Cold soil slowed growth, but potatoes compensated with high-calorie yield. Their main weakness was rot during wet seasons. However, when handled carefully, potatoes transformed short summers into reliable energy, making them central to survival once techniques improved. Mountain farmers stored potatoes in earth pits lined with straw and soil. These pits protected tubers from frost while allowing ventilation. Unlike cellars, pits required no construction or materials. Properly stored, potatoes lasted through winter. Nutritionally, they delivered carbohydrates, potassium, and vitamin C. Today, potatoes remain cheap and accessible, but pit storage knowledge has largely disappeared despite its continued effectiveness in cold climates. The advantage of potatoes was efficiency. A small plot produced significant calories. The disadvantage was dependency. When disease struck, losses were severe. Mountain farmers learned not to rely on potatoes alone, but to integrate them into diversified systems. Today, seed potatoes are affordable and widely available, but the historical lesson remains clear. Potatoes are powerful survival crops only when combined with others. Winter cabbage thrived in cold climates because it tolerated frost and grew large in short seasons. Farmers planted it early to allow full head formation before winter. Once mature, cabbage resisted cold damage better than most greens. Its size provided bulk calories when food was limited. The main disadvantage was storage space, but its durability made it indispensable in mountain households facing long winters. Cabbage was rarely eaten fresh alone. It was fermented into sauerkraut, transforming it into shelf-stable food rich in vitamin C. This prevented deficiency when fresh greens vanished. Fermentation required no fuel, salt was minimal, and storage lasted months. Today, cabbage remains inexpensive and easy to grow. Its preservation potential makes it one of the most efficient cold-climate vegetables ever cultivated. Buckwheat was used as an emergency crop in mountain regions because it matured rapidly. Farmers planted it after late frosts or when other crops failed. It tolerated poor soil and required little preparation. Its disadvantage was frost sensitivity, but its speed compensated for risk. Buckwheat turned brief warmth into edible grain, making it a vital fallback when seasons collapsed unexpectedly. Historically, buckwheat was ground into flour for porridge and flatbreads. It provided carbohydrates and minerals without demanding long seasons. Today, buckwheat seed is inexpensive and easy to source. It remains valuable for gardeners facing unpredictable climates. While it does not store as long as rye, its role as rapid insurance crop makes it relevant wherever seasons shorten. Sorrel emerged early in cold regions, often while snow still lingered nearby. As a perennial, it returned without replanting, reducing labor and risk. Rich in vitamin C, sorrel corrected winter deficiencies when diets were repetitive. Its disadvantage was low-calorie content, but its value lay in health maintenance. Today, sorrel remains easy to grow and nearly maintenance-free. Mountain farmers use sorrel to refresh meals dominated by roots and grains. Its acidity stimulated appetite and digestion during late winter weakness. Sorrel blurred the line between food and medicine. Modern gardeners often overlook it, but seed and plants are inexpensive. Its ability to survive frost and neglect makes it a reliable early-season green in cold climates. Nettles thrived without cultivation in cold mountain regions. They appeared early in spring, offering nutrition before gardens produced. Once cooked, their sting disappeared, revealing iron-rich, protein-dense greens. Their advantage was zero cost and zero effort. The disadvantage was handling discomfort. Today, nettles remain free, abundant, and highly nutritious, yet largely ignored despite their historical importance in survival diets. Nettles were more than food. They were indicators of resilient land. Their presence signaled soil rich enough to recover after winter. Mountain farmers harvested nettles early, fed them to animals, and returned nutrients to fields through compost and manure. This closed a survival loop. Nettles strengthened both people and soil at the same time. Their role wasn't culinary, it was systemic, supporting recovery after months of depletion. Mountain farmers did not plan for success, they planned for failure. Each crop served a specific role when another failed. Roots stored calories, greens restored health, grains stabilized meals. Wild plants filled gaps. No single harvest was trusted. This layered approach prevented total collapse when frost arrived early, rain ruined fields, or darkness shortened seasons. Survival came from redundancy, not optimization. In mountain regions, planting followed terrain. South-facing slopes were reserved for slower crops. Low valleys trapped cold air and frost, so they were planted cautiously or avoided. Wind-exposed areas favored low, resilient plants. Farmers read shadows, snowmelt patterns, and soil warmth before planting. These observations mattered more than calendars. Understanding microclimates allowed crops to survive where general rules failed. Labor was limited in mountain life. Short seasons meant intense bursts of work, followed by long inactivity. Crops were chosen to reduce daily effort. Plants that overwintered or returned without replanting saved time and energy. Storage methods favored simplicity over precision. Survival systems minimized dependence on constant attention. This allowed families to endure long winters without exhausting resources before spring arrived. If this kind of knowledge matters to you, consider subscribing. Each week we uncover crops and systems that kept people alive when isolation, cold, and uncertainty were normal. This isn't about nostalgia or gardening trends. It's about understanding how food systems worked when failure carried consequences. These lessons still matter in a world facing unstable climates and fragile supply chains. Every crop discussed here can still be grown today. None require advanced tools, technology, or expensive inputs. Seeds are widely available and affordable. Most tolerate poor soil and inconsistent weather. What has changed is expectation. Modern gardening favors convenience and yield. Mountain crops favor resilience. When planted with the same priorities, these plants still perform exactly as they did centuries ago. These crops remain among the cheapest foods to grow. Seed costs are low, storage requires minimal infrastructure, and many return year after year. Nettles cost nothing. Sorrel and cabbage propagate easily. Roots demand patience, not money. The real cost is knowledge. Knowing when to plant, where to plant, and what to expect matters more than investment in equipment or chemicals. None of these crops are perfect. Many are slow. Some are bland. Others demand patience. Mountain farmers accepted these disadvantages because the alternative was hunger. Flavor was adjusted with preparation, fermentation, and repetition. Modern systems often reject these foods for the same reasons they once saved lives. What was once considered a strength is now seen as inconvenience. These crops didn't disappear because they stopped working. They vanished because modern systems replaced resilience with efficiency. Global trade reduced the need for storage. Refrigeration replaced overwintering. Predictable supply chains hid risk. As long as systems functioned, these plants seemed unnecessary. Their decline wasn't agricultural failure. It was cultural amnesia, driven by temporary stability. Mountain farmers survived cold, darkness, and famine by accepting limits. They planted for conditions they could not control. They trusted crops that endured neglect, shadow, and uncertainty. These systems weren't primitive. They were precise responses to harsh environments. What remains is not a relic of the past, but a blueprint. And the final lesson is not about crops, but about preparation. In mountain regions, winter was not a season. It was a system. It dictated planting, storage, labor, and movement. Food had to function when nothing else did. Crops were chosen not to thrive in summer, but to survive winter. This inverted logic shaped every decision. Modern food systems still plan for abundance. Mountain farmers planned for absence. That difference defined who endured and who vanished. Uncertainty was constant in mountain life. Weather shifted suddenly. Frost arrived early. Snow lingered late. Farmers responded by spreading risk across crops with different strengths. Roots waited underground. Grains matured quickly. Greens returned early. Wild plants filled gaps. No single failure ended the system. This wasn't optimism. It was realism shaped by experience and loss. Storage was as important as planting. Food that spoiled easily was a liability. Mountain farmers favored crops that tolerated neglect and simple preservation. Pits, sand, snow, and fermentation replaced infrastructure. Storage didn't require precision. It required forgiveness. Crops that endured mistakes earned trust. This allowed families to survive months without fresh harvest or outside contact. Calories were managed carefully in cold regions. Food had to fuel labor while conserving effort. Meals were repetitive by design. Familiar foods reduced waste and decision-making. Cooking methods favored efficiency and warmth. Porridges, stews, and fermented foods stretched supplies. Survival depended not on variety, but on consistency. Mountain diets reflected this logic completely. Survival required more than calories. Long winters weakened bodies. Vitamin deficiencies threatened health. Crops like cabbage, sorrel, nettles, and stored roots prevented illness when fresh food disappeared. These plants weren't luxuries. They were safeguards. Mountain farmers understood that hunger and sickness arrived together. Preventing one helped prevent the other. Mountain survival relied on knowledge, not equipment. Farmers read snowmelt, shadows, wind, and soil warmth. They adjusted planting by observation, not calendars. Tools were simple. Techniques were refined. This knowledge passed through generations because mistakes were costly. Modern systems replaced this awareness with inputs and technology, often forgetting the logic behind the practices. Today, food systems depend on speed, scale, and constant movement. When transport stalls, shelves empty quickly. Mountain farmers lived without these assumptions. Their systems functioned in isolation. That difference matters. Modern abundance hides fragility. Mountain agriculture exposed it. The same conditions that once demanded resilience are returning through climate instability and supply disruption. These crops still work because conditions haven't changed. Cold still slows growth. Darkness still limits photosynthesis. Storage still matters. What changed was expectation. When grown with the same priorities, these plants perform exactly as they always have. They are not outdated. They are simply incompatible with systems built on speed rather than endurance. Mountain farmers did not prepare out of fear. They prepared because uncertainty was normal. Their systems reduced anxiety by reducing dependence. Food security came from acceptance, not panic. This mindset contrasts sharply with modern reactions to disruption. Preparation replaces fear when systems are designed for interruption rather than perfection. The lesson of mountain farming is simple. Survival belongs to those who plan for limits. Crops were chosen for endurance, storage, and recovery. Systems were built to absorb failure. These principles remain valid. They are not warnings of collapse, but instructions for resilience. What mattered then still matters now. Mountain farmers assumed that systems would fail. Roads closed. Trade stopped. Harvests were lost. Winter erased margins for error. Because of this, their food systems did not depend on continuity. They functioned during interruption. Modern systems assume constant flow. When that flow breaks, scarcity appears instantly. Mountain agriculture was designed for stoppage, not movement. That distinction explains why it endured when others collapsed. In cold regions, food was measured in time, not abundance. How many weeks could it last? How many months it could bridge? How long it could wait without spoiling? Crops were chosen for their ability to stretch time through winter. Storage was not about saving excess. It was about slowing loss. Survival meant extending usefulness until the land could produce again. Mountain diets were repetitive by necessity. The same foods appeared again and again. This was not failure. It was efficiency. Familiar meals reduced waste, decision fatigue, and risk. Variety was secondary to reliability. Modern systems equate variety with success. Mountain farmers equated repetition with survival. Eating the same foods was a sign that the system was working. Abundance hides weakness. Mountain farming exposed it. When resources were limited, skill mattered more than quantity. Knowing when to harvest, how to store, and what to combine determined survival. Crops alone did not save people. Knowledge did. This is why these systems persisted for centuries. They depended on understanding, not excess. This knowledge faded not because it failed, but because it became inconvenient. Modern systems removed visible risk. Refrigeration replaced storage skills. Imports replaced local resilience. Predictability replaced preparation. As long as systems worked, these crops seemed unnecessary. Their disappearance reflects comfort, not progress. Forgotten does not mean obsolete. Climate instability, energy constraints, and fragile logistics are restoring old conditions. Short seasons, unreliable harvests, interrupted supply. These are not new challenges. They are familiar ones returning. Mountain farmers already solved them. Their solutions still exist. They require adjustment of priorities, not reinvention. The crops discussed here still grow. The techniques still function. The limits still apply. What must change is expectation. Food systems built for endurance behave differently than systems built for speed. When planning shifts toward resilience, these plants reveal their value again. They were never outdated. They were simply waiting. Preparation does not require fear or urgency. Mountain farmers prepared quietly, year after year. They planted knowing some crops would fail. They stored knowing winter would come. This calm acceptance built systems that absorbed shock without panic. Resilience was not dramatic. It was deliberate and consistent. Crops were not judged by yield charts or market value. They were judged by survival. Did they grow in cold? Did they store in darkness? Did they return when needed? This standard shaped entire cultures. It remains the most honest measure of food security ever developed. Mountain farmers survived cold, darkness, and famine by understanding limits. They planted for failure, not perfection. They trusted crops that endured neglect and uncertainty. These choices were not primitive. They were precise responses to harsh reality. In rediscovering them, we are not looking backward. We are reclaiming tools that still work when systems fail.